about that time. Thank you so much for downloading today's episode of The Red Pill Investor. My name's John Ashley, a pseudonym of a realtor here in the great state of Arizona, here to help you with your real estate sales skills. Why? Well, just sort of my way to pay it forward for all the people who've given me the tips, the tricks, the things to say to get the contract signed when I needed it the most. Their only request of me, well, just simply pay it forward. And this is my opportunity to you, the listener, in the hopes that one day you'll pay it forward in your way. That way we'll keep this community alive and kicking. And boy, have I got a surprise for you today. I just got off the phone a little while ago today with Jared Lichtin. Now, Jared, if you're not familiar with who he is, you need to get to know this guy. He's got a competing podcast. It's not really competing. All podcasts are beneficial one to another. And what he decided when I asked him for an interview is he thought it would be great if we sat down together and did a mutual podcast. I got to tell you, this guy is smart. I love this idea of killing two birds with one stone. And in his case, he's a Texas attorney with a real estate lien. The guy started out as a real estate realtor, doing some lease work, ended up going into law school, was doing some law for a while, and then transferred into being an investor. Wow. And on his podcast, you can hear him go through his flip, and he explains step by step all the different things that he does with the deal that he's currently doing. So I would highly recommend that you check it out. Now, in today's podcast, it's a little bit long, and I do apologize. I got wrapped up in this conversation with him. It was fascinating. So you'll definitely want to take some pen, take some notes, get these thoughts into your head, because he has got some powerful ideas, especially if you're a wholesaler. If you've ever wanted to get an attorney's point of view on certain things, especially the dilemmas going on in Ohio right now, he's got some powerful words of advice. Also, he's got an incredible tip. His quote that I asked him, you know what? Hey, it was a powerful one, but one of the biggest ones I derived: nothing outclasses hustle. This guy is a fantastic interview. I had a wonderful time. So, without any further ado, I'd like to share with you my powerful, all enjoyable interview with Jared Lichtin. All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining me today with the Red Pill Investor Podcast, as well as the Flip Podcast with Jared Lichtin. Jared, are you there?
I'm here, Karl. Let's get it started.
I got to tell you, I am so excited for this podcast, Jared. You know, I was really glad to hear you suggest this idea of this simultaneous podcast. I'd never heard of that before. Did you have an idea where you heard that? I mean, where did you come up with this idea?
When you thought it would be a good idea to interview me, I figured why not just release it on my podcast, because it's going to co-benefit both our audiences. People co-mingle audiences all the time in the real world. You know, people co-brand things. They put Splenda and Lipton iced tea, and, you know, it benefits everybody. So let's just get it started and benefit everyone while we get the chance to.
I agree with that 100%. Good deal. Well, the pay it forward mentality is certainly in effect here. Listen, to kick things off, you know, I always like to start off our interviews on our podcast with a powerful quote. Jared, do you have a powerful quote that you wouldn't mind sharing with our audience?
I have several powerful quotes, but if you make me choose one, I'm going to have to copy off something I've heard several times before. I want to say that whether you're an entrepreneur or a real estate investor, imperfect action is better than no action at all. And if you're an entrepreneur trying to start a business, or if you're a new real estate investor trying to get started, you got to understand that you're just not going to know everything in the beginning. I mean, even as a lawyer, you know, I still don't know everything. And I'm sure you, Karl, are still learning new things every day. And you just got to get out there. And the main ingredient to being able to succeed is just hustling and getting out there, opening your mouth, asking questions, and networking with people. And that imperfect action is eventually just going to snowball, and you're going to get better and better and better over the course of weeks and months of, you know, not necessarily training, but you're going to be really getting experience in the real world as a real estate investor or an entrepreneur. And that imperfect action is eventually going to gain value, and you're going to be able to transmit that value onto other people, and it's just going to make you a better person and more successful over the course of time.
Wow. You know, I think that's a great quote to really get the day started. I mean, imperfect action is better than no action at all. And you're absolutely right. With real estate investors, it's got to be that way for us. We've got to take that action. And when I'm thinking about a best quote for me to just toss mine in, I would say if it was easy, everybody would do it and there'd be no money in it. That's one thing is for sure. I mean, if there's one thing I've learned in 19 years of this business is that it takes, a lot of skills, it takes a lot of practice, it takes a lot of time, and it takes that effort that so often we don't always want to give in return for the cash that we've received. Boy, I'll
Absolutely.
tell you, that's amazing. Well, listen, Jason, Jared, you've got a fascinating story. I mean, you're an attorney from Texas, as I understand. You're also an investor, and you briefly did some time as a realtor, so to speak. Would you mind telling me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'm going to get through the life story part as quickly as possible, but stop and hit the tidbits on the real estate part that really will provide each other's audiences with some value. So my story is, I always wanted to have something on the side. I was always trying to hustle and make money, any way I could. But I remember as far back as being 15 years old, I was going to Home Depot and I fit together parts to make a beer bong. And I sold beer bongs on eBay from about 15, 16 years old. And it was a good business for a while.
That's my man. I like that.
Oh, geez, man. I mean, like it's all, like I said before, when you're an entrepreneur, it's all about solving a problem. And when you see some things that, don't work. And so anyways, basically I always had something going on the side. And when I was in my freshman year in college, I had already bounced around to 2 schools at that point. And I was thinking, like, whatever, screw it. I'm just doing something awesome this summer. Sometimes you just get bored with life or your job, and you just got to be able to focus on yourself, be a little selfish, and just get out there and get it. So I thought, what if I looked on Craigslist, which was still pretty big at the time, I think 2005, 2006. And I decided that there were a couple brokerage firms in New York City that needed either interns or agents for the summer to kind of just get their real estate license and start leasing apartments. And so I looked up some information about getting your realtor's license, and it turns out it's a very low bar of entry. It wasn't nothing like going to law school. I mean, to go to law school, you have to take the LSAT, which is a year in and of itself, and there's just so much behind it. So there was a very low bar of entry, and I thought it would be a really cool thing to be able to say, hey, I got my real estate license, I'm going to go lease some apartments. And long story short, it didn't turn out to be that easy actually doing that. But as far as getting my real estate license, I was 18, 19 years old. I was in college, and I did my license online. I mean, it was a couple $100, and the courses you were clicking through, and it wasn't as technologically advanced as it might have been now, but it was very quick, and it took me 3 months. And I kind of take a step back. It wasn't a low bar of entry because the test was really hard. I mean, it's tricky. They don't want to just let anyone out there buying and selling real estate. So I remember going into, it was actually Pennsylvania, the PA Board of Realtors, and I had to transfer over to New York. But anyways, wasn't that easy. About 25% of the people pass on their first time. And I remember there were some 40, 50-year-old people complaining on their way out, like, hey, man, that was really hard, or like, hey, I failed 3 times. I got my results a couple weeks later, and I passed. I went to New York City, had a fun time that summer, watched the World Cup and hung out in places that most people never get a chance to hang out in. So I had a fun summer. But it got me a chance to really dip my toe into the whole real estate gig, and I hope that wasn't too long of a story for you there.
No, I mean, I think that's important for people to kind of hear. I think what I'm hearing a couple things out of this anyway is, first, you're a very young person comparatively. I mean, 18 years old, you're right on the cusp of what you can do legally anyway. And so now you're taking a very difficult, challenging assignment, if you will. You're right. The barrier to real estate is not always that hard. But the state exams and the federal exams do present a little bit of a challenge for some people. And I can see how people would have problems with that. And it is kudos to you to have the foresight to recognize that real estate was the vehicle for you to get some wealth. So once you got your license, how did you kind of transfer all that from I don't know, being a realtor, leasing a couple places, to an attorney, and then eventually an investor? How did you make that sort of switch?
Well, I've kind of delved in and out of the whole being an entrepreneur thing and being in my early 20s and going to college and then ending up in law school. You kind of go through phases in life. You go through being super motivated about one thing or super, stoked about one other business that you're in. And then you fall back on your real estate investing. And you're like, oh, I forgot how easy it was to make money doing this. So I mean, even over the past couple of months, I've gotten through points of where I'm like, oh, I don't want to buy another house. It's just so much of a hassle. But then, I got the opportunity to purchase this house, and it wasn't really that expensive. So I got such a good deal on it. I'm like, I'll make some money on it, so I'll purchase it. So,
well, since you bring that up, let's talk about that for a minute. Now, that's one of the things I noticed on your podcast you're doing. Now, your podcast and Red Pill Investors, you can certainly go check out his podcast. And where is that again that they could find that? It's the Flip podcast. Is that what it's called?
yeah, so all you have to do is go on iTunes. It's just called Flip, and we just launched about 15 days ago. It's only me producing it. I shouldn't even say we.
Right.
But
well, you're going in there and you're going like a step-by-step kind of thing, showing people precisely a rehab from the ground up, I guess. Is that sort of how that's working?
Yeah, so what I did was, like I said before, entrepreneurship to me is kind of like you being a problem solver. And when I saw that it took me so long to really figure out a way for people like new investors to understand what it takes to flip houses, so sick of seeing stuff on HGTV where they're not including things like commissions and holding costs and utilities. And people probably think it's so easy and get into it and get in trouble. Or on the other end, they're sold a expensive program from that they shouldn't be buying in the first place that is just too expensive, and it's way much more education than they need than they could get out of books or networking on a place like Bigger Pockets. And to sidestep, I mean, we met on biggerpockets.com, and that is literally the place that I kind of really started my house flipping education.
A lot of people listen to Bigger Pockets. It's a very big, influential blog as well as podcast.
Oh, yeah, and I wasn't even really listening to the podcast when I found it. I was more, for me, networking with other investors and to say, hey, like who's in the area that's an investor that I can meet, or who can someone give me some advice on lending or like creating business partnerships. And that really getting on the ground and communicating with people and understanding what it takes to start is much more important than spending $2,000 at the Hilton by the airport and spending the weekend learning to flip 30 houses. It's just not realistic for a lot of people.
That is a crucial point I think that you made right there, that I think if anybody's got a pen or a piece of paper and they're taking some notes down right now, I think that's a really critical point, that he just made. When you network with other people, be it on Bigger Pockets or locally, you can find a lot of information if you just simply take the time to do some research on your own, and you'd learn a lot more practical information than you might going to some seminar where you learn how to achieve some, if you want to sell $100 million 1,000 houses or something. Yeah, that's an absolute critical point. Please, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to make sure everybody got that.
No, it's totally fine. And as a side note, if I may jump in, it's the same thing with starting a business or being an entrepreneur. I mean, you have to get out there and hustle. There are going to be people that are better than you. There's going to be people that have more money than you, and they can outclass you that way. But nothing outclasses hustle. And if you get out there and you open your mouth and you shake hands and you get to know people and, you put numbers in your phone and look at deals, and it goes with anything, not just real estate. The people that open their mouth and get on the ground and grind are going to be the ones that succeed. And it doesn't matter if you have $1 million in the bank or a 4.10 GPA. Like, it really doesn't frickin' matter. Like, you got to get out there and open your mouth, and you got to be able to hustle.
I was just writing some notes. I didn't mean to drop that right there, but I was just writing down some notes. You said nothing outclasses hustle. And if there's ever a tweetable kind of quote, that is a great one. Nothing outclasses hustle. That's a great point. So, when you're rehabbing this place, and you're obviously, well, I don't know for sure. Now, you've been wholesaling for a while. I'm sorry, you've been investing for a while.
Yeah,
you did it, but you did it while you started as an attorney. That must have been hard, because I have an ex-wife who's an attorney, and she works
a lot of people
really hard. Yeah, how did you do that? I mean, as far as time demand, that's a pretty demanding job. How did you rehab houses and have that kind of time?
Okay, so let me take a step back and finish your other question. Perfect
Oh, I'm
timing for
sorry.
you to ask that. No, I'm saying that's a perfect time for you to step back and ask that. So, as I was going through law school, I did find bigger pockets in 2011, and I graduated in 2012, took the bar exam in Texas, and I'm actually from Northeast Ohio. I'm from Cleveland, so I'm temporarily living up here. Me and my girlfriend are moving back to Houston, where it's a little bit warmer. So, anyways, I was in law school. I started reading up on real estate investing, and I realized that one of the biggest things learning to flip houses is you need a good contractor. And luckily, I was lucky enough to already have a good contractor. I knew him since I was a kid, and he was the guy that worked on my parents' houses. His name's David. And so I used him on my first couple flips, and I started really looking at investments and buying properties toward the end of taking the bar exam. And so I passed the bar, and I got about a 10-day break. It turns out I got a job in oil and gas, and I was working as an oil and gas attorney right where I was from in Northeast Ohio. All the fracking stuff you hear about, all the leasing and all the drilling, I'm a statistic. I was one of those jobs. So I was helping the uh, energy companies drill for oil, and I was very unhappy. I had to travel a lot. I was really bored, and to tell the truth, I was freaking miserable. Like, I was dying. A lot of days I was just dragging out of bed. And if you've had a corporate full-time job sometimes where you can't look yourself in the mirror at night, you almost have to apologize to yourself for limiting yourself sometimes. It just depends what kind of job you have, and I just wasn't passionate about it.
How old
But
were you at that point?
I graduated law school when I was 23, and excuse me, I graduated law school when I was 26, and I passed the bar exam and had worked as an oil and gas attorney for the last like 2 or 3 years, and then up until 2 months ago, I said whatever to my job and I quit. I think I was probably the only attorney at that firm to quit without another job, probably ever. Most people transfer to another firm or do something.
Cow. Wow. And how old are you now?
28.
Oh my God. Kudos to you. I mean, when I'm just thinking about it, I mean, I gotta hand it to you. I mean, that is a incredible story. I mean, so far what I'm hearing is, you dedicated a lot of time to become an attorney. You got a job very quickly, but you ended up not being very happy with it. But you found real estate. You started rehabbing houses. You had some help. You had a friend of the family who was able to kind of coordinate things with you. You saw this as a way out. And unlike most people who just say, oh, I need to ignore my fears and, I just need you just took it and went. You just ran with and no matter what. That
Yeah.
is amazing. Good for you.
I appreciate it, man. I wish you were. I wish my parents sounded a lot more like you, but you know what? I didn't originally see it that way, though, Karl. I didn't originally see it as a way out. I saw it as a way to make money on the side, like I'd been doing my whole life. I saw it as a way to create something that cash flows. Huge 4-hour work week fan over here. I try to
Right. Me
automate
too.
as much stuff. Great. I mean, it's such an awesome book, and it's just such a mentality shifter. It allowed me to automate a lot of stuff in my business. So in the 2 or 3 years I was working as an attorney, I flipped just 1 or 2 houses a year. I think I'm on my like 5th one right now technically, but I was only able to do a couple a year. I'm not a huge, I'm not flipping 100 houses a year, but I understand what it takes. So over the course of the last couple years, I got to the point where I could pick up a house in the winter, rehab it, sell it, pick up a house in the summer, rehab it, sell it, and the realtors did all the work selling it and marketing it. And the contractors, for the most part, did all the work, painting and remodeling the house and stuff like that. So I didn't need to be hands-on. I just needed to be able to analyze deals and kind of be a people manager rather than, focus on my work or real estate. I was able to do both.
And that's exactly why I think that a lot of the people who listen to the Red Pill Investor podcast are really going to resonate with you and your story, because you're right. Earlier you'd mentioned that that you can go to some seminar and learn how to sell 100 homes a year or whatever it is, but if and that's one side of the spectrum. But on another side of the spectrum, there's the 4-hour kind of work week. It's like living to live within your means and have a life worth living and a purpose and passion, and there's these spectrums where you can either work yourself to death, it seems, or you can work and get what you need and be happy. And I'm sort of discovering as I'm getting older, I'm 45, and like I mentioned, kudos to you for being 28 and taking this step. It's so much easier to work from that end of the spectrum. And once you start working that way, you find that more deals come to you. It's crazy.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes as you get older, you think it might be harder, but it's really just all about your mindset in relation to what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So now, I certainly don't want to make this a situation where it's all bed and roses. It's just great. I mean, obviously, you've had some times that were not so good. Would you mind sharing something, maybe a biggest challenge that you might have faced in the rehabs that you were doing, and maybe how you overcame it?
Well, I would really like to say that my biggest challenge was dealing with that job I had. I mean, it was crushing, and I can share definitely my fair share of failures with the whole real estate thing, but as far as in life, it's all about work-life balance, and to be able to, your loved ones and your spouse, to be able to have a good work-life balance and have time to yourself. If you have a job that's just crushing you and you just can't stand it every day, you got to be able to use your time outside of that job to be able to research or, get started on hustling to do something else, maybe like a business, because you can't just jump into and quit and start something else. Things have to overlap in life, and you kind of have to like diversify like Martha Stewart has, or else she wouldn't be able to still be successful after whatever she did. So diversifying and be able to do different things is important. But as far as my failures in real estate, I mean, a lot of it comes down to A, not being prepared, and B, not being knowledgeable. I remember the first house I flipped. By the end, I did not calculate the after repaired value right. I jumped into a house that was way much more expensive than a beginner investor should be doing. I was trying to sell a house for about $230,000. I ended up selling it for about $215,000, I think. But I remember there was something I didn't account for that was about $1,000, and I opened up the Chase app on my iPhone. This is about 2 years ago, and I had about $90 in my bank account. That was a huge failure and a huge scary thing for me to have to see that all my money's set in one thing, and I have to understand that in order to be successful in life or as a real estate investor, understanding how much money you're putting into things and how much money things are going to cost ahead of time, that's valuable, and that's what's going to save you the headache in the future.
I think that's some very profound advice. I really think that when you think about it, and I like to, with my coaching or my podcast or whatever, I always like to tell people to begin with the end in mind so that you can plan for things. And obviously there's unforeseen contingencies and things like that that come in. But it sounds like your biggest challenge, as I understand it, was just really trying to find a way, at whatever cost, to get out of this crushing situation. And for you, you decided that real estate was just a means, a side job, so to speak, and you've discovered that that's a way to make that happen for you and live the way you want to live. And that's kind of what I'm hearing. Am I
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I don't absolutely, Carl, and I don't know exactly what my future holds. I'm still right now trying to start up other businesses and do some research on what my next thing is, especially after I move to Houston. It's going to
Sure.
be tough getting acclimated to a new market, a more expensive market, and I'd have to network with other investors to be able to afford houses, especially because now that I don't have a job, I can't secure loans from banks as easily. But I mean, to me, I would actually be really interested when you were younger, what you thought your biggest challenges were, because you're a broker, am I right, Carl?
Yes, yes.
What do you think the
I've been
biggest
a
challenges
broker.
were?
I've been a broker for, oh goodness, I've been an agent for almost 19 years now, and I've been a broker for probably 12 of them, I'm guessing. And I would say the biggest challenge that I faced professionally was the robo-signing mess. When the banks were doing all their foreclosures, and then there was some question as to whether or not they had legitimately foreclosed on them because of some irregular practices.
Sure.
And they were known as robo-signing. And why that was a big challenge to me was, well, in my beginnings, I was a realtor in Charleston, South Carolina before I moved to Tucson, Arizona. And when I moved to Tucson, I saw a guy who was an REO broker, And he just had stacks and stacks of files. And I said, what is all that? And he says, oh, these are all the deals I got coming in from the banks as soon as I get done with the foreclosure process. And I discovered that's what foreclosure was all about. And I thought to myself, okay, cool. Well, in a rising market, then I'll sell for sale by owners, and I'll sell expired listings and things like that to make money, and flip houses and whatnot as they come along. And then when the market crashes, because what goes up must come down, it
Sure.
will. Then because I just experienced that in Charleston, then I'll sell REO. I'll put myself in that position, and it worked to a T. I mean, it worked great. It couldn't have worked better. I was so smart, I thought to myself, right? So I was selling for sale by owners, selling expireds as the market was heating up. And then at the top of the market, 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-ish, or really 5-ish, 6-ish, then the market started to collapse. And there was a lot more REOs coming on the market. And then I was perfectly positioned. I had several REO accounts. I had Freddie Mac, Bank of America, some of the bigger names, and I would sell some of their properties as an REO broker. And so all these agents were trying to break into the REO business, but I was already there. And the reason why it worked out really well for me was because when I was the only person there, or one of the few only ones there, I was able to get a lot of deals. And so because of that, that and the other business I was doing, I was able to get about 75 transactions a year running with just myself and my assistant, who would handle the paperwork. No buyer's agents or anything like that.
Jeez.
And the biggest challenge came when I thought I had figured it all out. I thought I was smarter than everybody. I'll plan for when the market goes up, a plan for the market goes down, but I did not plan for when people got greedy. And then
Who got greedy?
The banks, yeah. And when they did the robo signing, right? Well,
Yeah.
guess what? Attorneys from across the United States filed suits, states sued, everybody sued, and everything froze to a halt. I had like 20-something listings, I had all kinds of inventory, contracts getting ready to close, money coming in the bank, and then everything went away. In a minute, just like that. Bank calls up, says, hey, guess what? By the way, everything we have with you is on hold. We're not selling anything until this suit thing gets resolved. And then you got to start from zero.
Yeah.
That leads to a really important, thing that Mike Ferry taught me. If you start every day at zero, then you start that proper mindset. You start thinking to yourself, oh crap, I got no money in the bank. I got no buyers. I got no sellers. I got no A to B contracts. I got nothing. I got to go out there and hustle.
Absolutely. And I saw a meme the other day on Instagram. It said, the only thing that matters is the 24 hours ahead of you. Something like that.
That's
and
a good one too, yeah.
I'm not much of a meme retweeter, but I really wanted to save it on my computer and put it as my background.
Absolutely. No, that's absolutely true. No, but that was my biggest challenge as a broker, and that's kind of how I got started.
Huh. That's great. I mean, I want my audience to understand, a little bit about your background. So now I guess that they understand a little bit about you, and you have, obviously, you have your brokerage firm. Am I correct?
Well, I'm an associate broker at Realty Executives Tucson Elite. And we have, obviously owners and stuff who own the company. I'm not one of the owners, but I'm an associate broker there, yes.
Huh. Okay. So let's continue. What else you got for me? Sorry if I broke off and asked you a couple questions.
No problem. Well, I guess that was a perfect segue, really. I mean, we were talking a little bit about your business, your challenges, and we kind of talked a little bit about my business and my challenges. Let's talk a minute about maybe some real estate stuff, some stuff that maybe our listeners that might mutually appreciate. I have a question for you, and obviously this is not legal advice, so I'm not looking for any kind of lawyerly sort of advice. Yep. But, I think as an attorney, I think it's probably fair to say you've got a unique perspective, especially as I understand it, you are a real estate attorney with a specialty in oil and gas. Is that correct?
Well, I did work in oil and gas for several years, so I'm very knowledgeable about property law and contracts, especially, in Ohio, West Virginia, PA area. I understand all about leasing and all sorts of oil and gas drilling assignments and stuff.
All right.
But
Good
as
deal.
far as, it was mostly oil and gas work. But I understand the real estate game from working in it myself.
Okay, good. I'm curious. There's, again, not any legal advice, but I am curious, what is your take on the current situation in Ohio with regards to unlicensed wholesalers taking activity? The Department of Real Estate recently came out with some very, very stringent standards, very tough words for people who are unlicensed wholesaling investors who are either virtually wholesaling in the state of Ohio or physically wholesaling in the state of Ohio. There's been a lot of fines handed down. I mean, pretty considerable amount of money, $500,000, $1,500 fines to unlicensed people by the state. Can you tell me, what's your opinion on that sort of thing? Being as a resident of the state, as an attorney who's practiced in other areas, just your general overview. Again, no legal interpretations.
Yeah, I think our audiences both understand that I am not expressly consenting and stating that
Right.
I am, giving any legal advice right now, because I don't expect anyone to take it like that. But as far as I'm concerned, any sort of statute that's been put in place by the state of Ohio, and in this case, it's the Ohio Real Estate Commission, they're doing it for a certain purpose. And I looked online last night, and obviously we conversed a little bit about some of these new laws that were in place, and they were enacted in 2011 and 2012. And that was a time in Ohio where there still was a lot of foreclosures. There still was a lot of, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae properties available. And when you have that sort of inventory, and maybe it's not outclassed, but there's more than the investor market in Ohio could take, there are people out of state or maybe who aren't as familiar with investing, taking advantage of this influx of foreclosures. So the market was still in the process of picking back up, and I don't have any specific knowledge as to this, but I can only say that there's a huge threat on Bigger Pockets about wholesaling in Ohio. And I didn't get a chance to go through much of it because I kind of wanted to get my own opinion on things. But I think what the Ohio Real Estate Commission is trying to do is respond to the amount of not just unlicensed activity, but unknowledgeable investors out there, people who maybe signed up for a course or, I'd like to sidestep right now and say that just because someone's offering coaching does not make them a coach. Just because someone's offering to do speaking engagements doesn't mean they're qualified. It's just because they made some Facebook ads or they had a good marketing team behind them and, it's fancy, whatever. But when you actually get into these programs, I'd like to know what some of these people have to say about their experience or how much money they've made or things like that. And it's really hard for new investors to kind of fact check these things and look online on Google and rip off report and see who's offering the right things. But I think what the Ohio Real Estate Commission is responding to is a lot of unlicensed activity out there that's in turn hurting brokers and hurting agents. So I imagine that as a real estate agent, you wouldn't like to see 10 unqualified investors in your backyard picking up houses to sell and putting their name in a sign on their lawn and saying, hey, Joe Schmo Real Estate, I'm selling this house on behalf of myself and only myself, and I'm keeping 100% of the commission. And as an agent, you know that you're not keeping 100% of your commission. A huge chunk of it's going to the broker. And there's a process to things. And it's the same reason that any sort of entity or any sort of profession is going to have their high bar to entry because they want to educate people and they don't want unlicensed activity going on. Doctors don't want, unlicensed doctors coming into hospitals and fixing people up. Attorneys have very, very stringent standards for ethics and for unlicensed activity that even non-attorneys can get in big trouble for. So what the Ohio Real Estate Commission is trying to prevent here is losing out, not just losing out on commission, but maybe buyers or sellers who are maybe a little bit new to it and don't understand what wholesaling is. They might be trying to deal with someone who's trying to assign them a contract, which even as an attorney, me, is a difficult thing to do. And then they might be dealing with someone exchanging or purchasing real estate with them who is not a professional, who in fact went to the Hilton by the airport for a weekend, deal on yellow letter wholesaling and literally has no idea what's going on. So they're trying to protect buyers and sellers. They're trying to protect they're trying to protect brokers, real estate agents from unlicensed activity and from getting hurt financially.
I think that's probably an accurate representation of that. I know that at least for the Arizona Department of Real Estate and the reports that I see for wholesalers, unlicensed activity and things like that, the department's always made it very, very clear that their position is to protect the public. And I imagine that, the Department of Ohio is probably the same way. And they probably say, hey, look, there's a lot of people, like you mentioned, who've come through here. As a real estate broker, I have a sort of a view on it myself. I think you're probably 100% correct in your assertion that they're trying to protect commissions as well as the public. And I would probably add that, what they're really saying here is, listen, if you're going to wholesale or invest in real estate in Ohio, okay, you got to have some kind of knowledge about you. If you're going to be just Joe Schmuckatelli buying a house, then that's one thing. I mean, you're going to make some mistakes and whatever. You're Joe Schmuckatelli selling your house, fine, you're going to make some mistakes. But if you're an investor, a wholesaler, and like you said, you went down to the airport down by the the Hilton by the airport,
Yep.
and now you're sending out a lot of stuff. If you don't have the language correct, exactly what to say to these people so they don't get the wrong idea that you're being an agent for them, that you're representing
Sure.
them. I think that's one of the things that at the Red Pill Investor Podcast, that's one of the things that I try to promote, is how to control those sales environments. When
Sure.
you're talking to that customer so they can understand, especially if you're a realtor, realtors who flip houses, as have a lot of extra fiduciary responsibilities that the unlicensed wholesaler doesn't have. And, it's a very interesting concept. Now, I'm curious, as an attorney, when we start thinking about fiduciary responsibilities, I don't know much, but I've always heard they kind of pound that into you. Is that fair to say?
Well, yeah, I mean, it depends, what party is who and what you're trying to do. But when you're holding money, say as an attorney, or when you're holding money as a realtor, you're getting earnest money for a property, you have a very specific fiduciary responsibility, because once you are starting to deal with, people handing you checks and money, and the state bar is going to put a very high bar of ethical responsibility on you for being able to handle that correctly, because attorneys in Texas, and just to be completely clear, I am an attorney in the state of Texas, not
Right,
Ohio, but
right.
The state bar of Texas is, and like other state bars, they don't want attorneys going around pooling client funds outside of their trust account and putting it in their personal account. That's a very serious ethical violation. And I was surprised in law school when I found out that you have to take an entirely separate ethical exam called the MPRE to be able to be licensed as an attorney. And it's not an easy test. They want you to be able to be trusted. And in the public eye, if lawyers aren't trusted, they're not going to be able, no one's going to use them. But to get back to your thing on fiduciary responsibility, any sort of professional license you have that allows you to handle money in the public eye is going to put a very high bar of responsibility on you. So when you handle money, the state bar or the state real estate commission, they're not gonna just let any schmo out there without any education or without any knowledge just assign a $5,000 contract to someone. Or, like, I'm not talking about $5,000 contract, but if you buy a house for $50,000, an investment property, you want to wholesale it for $55,000 to another, assigning a contract and looking at all the contractual clauses in there. I mean, I wouldn't even do that without getting an attorney, and I'm not a wholesaler. But the financial responsibility you have once you start holding money for people and once you start assigning money, I mean, as an attorney, you have to put all that stuff into a client trust account, at least in the state of Texas. And it's not very easy to get around anything like that when you're charged with it for the first time, because they made you pass an exam that said, hey, I'm not going to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's exactly where I think I'm coming from when we speak about realtors in particular who invest. I think, again, I'm not an attorney. I certainly don't know any better than anybody else. And my guess is just as good as anybody else's. But my guess is that if you're a wholesaler who's unlicensed in Ohio, assignments probably aren't a good idea. You definitely want to check with your own attorney there. Double closes and stuff are always, an option,
Sure.
because that's certainly legal for you.
You're talking about the closings in the other room? Those.
If that's the case, or transactional funding, yeah, whichever
Okay.
whichever case. I think in Ohio, as in most states, they probably prohibit wet funding. I'm sorry, dry funding. They probably want it to be wet funds, so you have to bring your own money or use transactional funding and not use the end use buyer's funds to close. I imagine that's probably the status there. That's the way it is here in Arizona, but well, that's not always true. But the point I
Yeah.
guess I'm trying to make is that when you start talking about, especially like your podcast, where we're talking about how to rehab a house, that's the very specific skill set on how to automate the systems, how to get a good contractor, how to do this, how to do that. And then there's an entirely different skill set when we're starting to talk about getting it under contract. And that's kind of where my podcast comes in. So it works out good for the both of us to be here.
Absolutely. And if I may, before we quickly move on,
Sure.
when you're wholesaling properties, I mean, you're dealing in states that you might be out of state, and a lot of wholesalers work out of state. And it's important to understand that wholesaling and dealing with different real estate transaction, that's a state-specific law. It's not federal law, and it's just like marijuana or same-sex marriage. And at the moment, it's not federal law, it's state-specific, and you have to respect the state's laws where you're working. You can't just go, buy marijuana in Colorado and smoke a joint in Nebraska. It's not that easy. And that's basically what you're doing by being unknowledgeable and going into different markets and practicing real estate under, say, Arizona's law, and then going into New Mexico and doing something that Arizona, it's okay. The Ohio Real Estate Commission is elected by Governor Kasich in Ohio. It's a board elected by the governor, and they're very serious. And they don't want anybody able to unlicensed practice of real estate, and they're going to, charge civil penalties for it.
Yeah, they've certainly done it. Whew, boy, I'll tell you, that was the end of the questions that I had for you. Did you have any questions for me before we tied up today's call?
How do you free up your time as a real estate agent? Can you automate your processes?
Yeah, it's funny you should mention that. I mean, I think a lot of it, at least for me, doing 75 transactions in a year with one assistant, it requires, I think, again, this process beginning with the end in mind. And here's what I mean by that. What I did to systematize everything, to organize everything to where I could have a person step in and then replace me if I was gone or do what I needed done, is as I went through my day as a new agent in my company and whatnot, I wrote down the things that I did. So whenever I took a listing or whatever, I'd say, okay, step one, enter an MLS. Step number two, give it to the copy to the front desk, things like that. And I would make systems and checklists and things like that for myself so that when I hired an assistant, then I wouldn't have to go back and reinvent the wheel. Like I said, okay, here's a standard operating procedure manual for you. And now you can work from that, and you have questions, give me a call. Now, that's just one part. The other part is a mindset thing. And again, going back to my training, I had learned this from Mike Ferry. When you generate, you don't have to tolerate. So when you go out and you generate a lot of business, like you mentioned the hustle, when you go out and you generate a lot of leads, okay, you don't have to tolerate a lot of crap from people. See, what a lot of realtors do and investors, wholesalers do, what they do is they go out to the house and they, hope, pray, and beg that the seller will, sell the home to them. And that's a really disempowering place to start. So if you go out and you generated a bunch of leads, let's say you had 10 motivated seller leads that you generated. I'm not talking the kind that you buy from the internet. I'm talking about the kind that, are really, hey, yeah, we're going to sign a contract in 7 days. We got to figure out what to do. Can you come over and talk to me?
Yeah.
If you had 10 of those and one guy was being a jerk, You wouldn't care. You just wipe it off. You just blow him off. You go to the next guy because you know you got 9 other people you can service. But the problem is, again, beginning with the end in mind, agents, investors, we don't put any significant lead generation systems in place to give you the leads you need so you can say, hey, take a hike, to somebody.
Yeah.
So, well, what is it that stops us then? Well, for me, it's beginning with that idea that we have to begin with prospecting and lead generation as the most critical form of our business, and that's where it starts.
Huh. That's really incredible, Karl. I can't believe that you've been able to wholesale and flip and be an agent. I mean, it seems like you have such a, I mean, I have such a specific knowledge, but it really goes to show that you can't just acquire this over the weekend. You need years and years of experience, but to get started, you don't need that. You just need to kind of start networking and get out there and go for it.
Well, when I think about, the tragedy, what I call the tragedy of the modern wholesaler, my specific niche and your niche is rehabs and people who are interested in that process and how to do this from start to how to do it with a job. And that's a great market, and I really appreciate that. And my sort of people, at least that I've sort of understood to follow what I kind of listen to what I have to say, they tend to come up with these thoughts of, all right, how can I do this in less time without having to spend a fortune to do it because they don't have a lot of money? And I call it the wholesaler's tragedy. So my first quote unquote wholesale deal, okay, I was in California, and my brother was watching my business at the time, and he got a referral, and he says, oh man, we got this business thing that came. We got this piece of business came in this house, and it's boy, I don't know that we want this as a listing though. And I said, well, why is that? He says, oh, it's a piece of crap. I said, oh, okay. He says, I said, well, where is it? He says, it's over here in this area of town. And I knew the area of town. It was a really nice area. And I said, oh my goodness, wow, that's a nice area. How much does she want for it? And he said 70,000. And I said, holy crap. I said, that's a great price. I'll buy it. He says, what do you mean? I said, tell her I'll buy it. Just write up the contract for me, and I'll write up the contract. Just write in there, and or signs, and I'll see you there in a few days. So he writes up the contract for, for 70,000. I get there, and woo, he was right. It was a mess. My brother is a great judge there when it comes to that stuff. And when I went there, I looked at the house. I didn't know about building a buyer's list. I didn't know about MAO or ARV or anything like that. I just knew as a realtor what a value was because what homes had been selling for in that area I could see on MLS and whatnot. So I just simply called one investor that I knew, and I asked him to meet me out there during my inspection period. I met him in the backyard, and I said, gosh, how much do you think this place you'd give me for if I was just sign the contract over to you? And he says, well, how much do you want for it? And I said, well, I want 80. I didn't know.
It's a good number.
Yeah, I
it's a
thought
good
80.
number.
Oh, sure, whatever, right? He says, well, I can't give you 80. I'll tell you what, I'll give you 75. And I said, well, I can't take 75, but I'll meet you in the middle. I'll tell you what, let's make it 77. He said, okay, great. So we did 77. Signed a one-page assignment, and then we closed a few days later, right? Now,
That was your first one?
no, it wasn't my first one. It was my first one that I knew was called a wholesaling. You see,
Oh, I see. Okay,
here's the
okay.
key. See, prior to that, a couple years prior to that, my brother, same brother, he had been telling me he'd been getting into wholesaling, and I was a broker, mind you, and he's telling me about wholesaling. Yeah, I'm going to get these properties under contract. We're going to flip them. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. You get them at a low price and flip them high. And I'm like, I don't know. That sounds pretty illegal to me, and I just sloughed it off. I didn't think anything about it. Well, now 2 years later, here I am wholesaling a deal in front of him. And he's the agent, who's representing the property. Here's the deal. I made $7,000 on the property. The agent that represented it, my brother, made $2,100, which is a 3% commission. And in 10 minutes time, I made 3 times as much money as I would have as an agent.
Yeah.
And that's, even then, didn't click to me as, maybe I should do this full time.
Yeah.
Even then, I was still, taking listings and things like that. So it was much later when, again, the robo-signing crisis came, and all of a sudden I've got no listings, no inventory, and I'm like, holy crap, what am I going to do?
Sure.
And then
And I
that
think,
is when I remembered.
yeah, that really speaks to my audience too. I mean, they got to understand. I mean, they will understand that the value of getting your real estate license is so much more than just saving money on commission. You're going to
Oh
be able
my
to,
goodness.
yeah,
Yeah, let me,
networking with other investors. Go ahead, man.
oh,
Go
I
speak
mean,
on that.
yeah, oh my goodness. I mean, let me tell you, when you think about the power, okay, I hear this argument a lot on Bigger Pockets and other places. And it's like, should I get a license? Should I not get a license? Should I work with a realtor? Should I not work with a realtor? I mean, it's just this endless mental discussion. It's crazy. Here's why you should get your license. If you're planning on being an agent and if you're planning on being an investor and you're considering getting a license, here's why you should get it. If you're not planning on getting your license, you don't want to get it, don't worry about it, okay? But if you're thinking about it, then that might be a good idea for you to get it, and here's why. Because first of all, on the multiple listings service, it's not just the endless deals that you have on there, the REOs, the short sales, the distress sales, the handyman specials, the fix-up properties, all those, yeah, everybody gets access to that. But as an agent, especially if you're on MLS, you have access to the expired and the canceled listings as well. Now, expired and canceled listings, if you're not familiar with what those are, is simply this. It's simply properties that have had their contract with their listing agent expire, their home didn't sell, and now they're like free agents. They can list with anybody if they wanted to. But if you're an agent, there's a lot of services like the RedX or Land Voice that will provide the phone numbers for you for those expired listings. On the day they expire, you call them up and say, hey, guess what? I noticed that your home expired. I was just calling to see if you'd planned on selling it still. And they're like, well, we don't want to list our home. Great. I don't want to list your home. I want to buy it. You've got an access right there to a limitless supply of leads. And here's why that's awesome. It's better than for sale by owners. Because for sale by owners, everybody knows about them, and there's competition. They're good people, don't get me wrong. They're good contacts, but you got competition.
Yeah.
On an active MLS listing, hey, you might have, competing offers. But on an expired listing, the only competition you've got is other agents, and guess what? They don't want to list. And if you're an agent who invests or an agent who wholesales, hoo-wee, this is a great opportunity. Second thing that's awesome about being an agent, okay? Not only is it where you can go ahead and obviously from your marketing efforts, not everybody's going to want to take your wholesale offer. So there's a way in the Red Pill Sales System Script Book, it's a free download that I give out on our podcast, that is a listing conversion where if you're an agent, you can simply convert that presentation from a wholesale presentation into a listing presentation where now, okay, well, you don't want that offer? Great, let's talk about listing. That's another opportunity. So you have an extra income stream there. The extra thing, third reason why it's awesome, is because agents become your buyers.
Yeah.
That is, I mean, when I think about my buyers list, it is, I don't have a buyers list of 400 or 500 people. No, I've got 5. 5 guys I know that I email, text, or call, and I say, hey, look, this is the property I got. What do you think? And we're able to figure something out, very quickly, and it doesn't take a lot of time. The good thing about being a realtor is you're covered with the National Association of Realtors Code of Ethics. So everybody's got to kind of operate within that, and if they don't, then they got the hammer. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I hear you there. There's just so many different, the amount of investors that you know through your work, the amount of other agents. I mean, I imagine that if you have a good property or a bad property, it really wouldn't be that hard for you, but it would be really hard for someone like me who's just, getting 1 or 2 houses a year. First of all, I wouldn't have access to those expired listings, but you have the network of people at your disposal. And it's not just selling a house to another investor. Maybe sometimes it's just, hey, other investor, what do you think about this deal? Or is this a good deal? What do you think? Those are the kind of things that you can do in 10 minutes that nobody else can.
Well, there's that. And when you think about it, there's the other, side benefit of being able to do things maybe in a way that nobody else typically does. Like, for example, you can flip a home, from your iPhone. You can arrange just contracts being sent here and there and your Dropbox stuff, and people trust you, and they never, they see it through the phone, and use Meerkat to show them things. I mean, there's just so many things that you can do today with the technology that is available. That if you're a wholesaler making excuses saying, I don't know about ARV, I don't know about AMAO, I don't know how about bandit signs, I don't know if I should get how to buyers. Listen, I didn't know any of that. The only thing I knew was this was a cheap price, and that is a motivated seller. And if you can figure out that the more motivated they are, and use skills, sales skills to determine that, the more motivated they are, then the less work you have to do. You don't have to pound somebody a square peg into a round hole. If they are motivated, listen, your presentation is a solution to their problem, and they're happy to do it, and they will pay for it every time. And if you're a realtor, it's an extra plus because you get to use it as a bonus. You say, hey, use me because I'm a realtor, and it's safer.
Yeah, that's amazing. Me want to get my real estate license again.
Well, that's just my thought anyway.
No, I totally understand where you're coming from, but as far as I'm concerned, I'll figure my life out somehow, way or another.
Oh yeah, there's lots of people out there who are not investors. Who are not realtors and are perfectly happy. They're absolutely successful, and they've got tons of resources. You don't have to be a realtor to be successful. Absolutely not. But I do think as a realtor from that perspective, I think it is helpful, because it does give you the contacts. But again, it also relies, no matter what you do, whether you're licensed or unlicensed, I think your overall success, and you've certainly discovered this, is the sales skills that you've learned along the way. You've had to learn how to negotiate certain things with people to go do things for you. You've had to learn how to negotiate prices with people,
Yep.
Convince people to do things with you, and, reassure them, what to take your contract because you're an attorney and this is a well thought out, sort of a plan. It's all those things, all of those things are sales, and it all fits together.
Yep, absolutely.
Whew, boy, I'll tell you, I don't know that there's much more for us to say without wearing out our listeners. Did you have any other questions for me before we tie it up today?
Not much. Just as far as my audience is concerned, let them know how they can connect with you on your podcast and on your website.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, for our podcast, you can certainly follow us at TheRedPillInvestor.com. It's just like the Matrix movie. Instead of the blue pill, it's TheRedPillInvestor.com. And our blog is at TenMinuteSkill.com. That's TenMinuteSkill.com. And now for your podcast, it's, and I'm just going to make sure I get this right, it's FlipJL.com. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, that's my website.
Where can they follow you? You've got a great website. Is it your website you want them to hit that's got all your stuff on it?
Well, so what I do with my podcast is I'm just flipping one house, but I'm taking pictures and I'm bringing people through it step by step, and I'm allowing them to really follow me kind of like a narrative. If you listen to Alex Bloomberg's startup podcast, I'm trying to follow more of like a narrative story. It's not an interview-based podcast, but I do end up interviewing people like you, Karl. Mm-hmm. And so people can listen to my podcast on iTunes. It's just called Flip. And if you look up Flip on iTunes, it's one of the newer podcasts. I just launched, like I said, like 15 days ago. And I got really small niche following, and it's kind of cool to see people start reaching out to me. But my website, where people can follow my investment and see pictures and stuff, which I was out of the country for 10 days, so I just got a chance to update a ton of pictures. My blog, I just started blogging, so it's on there. And if you want to contact me, that's a way to contact me. So that's FLIPJL.com. Those are my initials. And again, Flip on iTunes. It's just called Flip. And on Twitter and Instagram, I'm at Jared Lichtin. That's JaredLichtin. And on Facebook, you can like my page. It's just the Flip Podcast. Flip Podcast on Facebook.
Awesome. Good deal. All right. So, I want to personally say thank you. on behalf of the Red Pill Investor Podcast community. I've got 1,900 folks in our community, and I know that they're just going to love hearing every single syllable that you told them, because I know the Ohio issue is certainly going to be something that's going to be very interesting to them. I am definitely going to make sure they hear the "nothing outclasses hustle" quote. I mean, that is powerful. I mean, that's stronger than 9-day-old garlic. I don't know what I don't know what else you could say.
Well, hey man, it just came to me. Maybe we should copyright it.
Awesome, good deal. Well, listen, I've got nothing else. I want to thank you for sitting down and talking with me today. Awesome,
Karl. Real pleasure to have you on my show. Thank you very much.
Awesome. All right. Well, you take care. Have a powerful day.
All right. Talk to you later, Karl.
All right. Bye-bye.
ROC, we running this rap shit. Memphis Bleak, we running this rap shit. B-Mac, we running this rap shit. Freeway, we running this rap shit. Owen Sparks, we running this rap shit.